Today's episode is about PBS. What that stands for is Positive Behavior Support. Now, that's a program that's psychologically research-based, which is backed by about 45 years worth of science. Now, if you want more information, you can actually go to PBIS.org, which happens to be the national association that covers positive behavior supports. It is free to anybody, and it is funded through the Department of Education of the United States. Every state under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, actually has a state center for PBS located in their state, which is free to run trainings and workshops and provides information. Happened to be in New Jersey, and our resource center here is the Boggs Center at Rutgers University, and they are a tremendous resource, and they're a wonderful university. You can Google that, Boggs Center, Rutgers University, and you will find a tremendous amount of PowerPoints, workshops, videos, and a whole bunch of resources you can use in your school. Now, I know in the recent years there's been some question whether you have to do PBS, because if you're teaching what's called SEL, or social and emotional learning, don't they actually contradict each other? And that's actually not true. PBS supports any SEL program that you're doing in your school because PBS does not affect academic learning. All it does is address inappropriate behaviors and modify them to more appropriate behaviors. That's all it does, and that's all the psychology and the research shows. What is PBS? Well, we can actually break it down into 4 different tenets. The first tenet is to identify the inappropriate behavior. This is very critical in terms of beginning the process of modifying inappropriate behavior. So you want to be very specific and measurable when you do that, because the more specific and measurable you are in the inappropriate behavior, the easier you are to be able to modify it to get to the last stage, which is the new behavior. The second tenet is to understand the student's motivation. And it's critical because if you don't know why the student is doing what they're doing, it's next to impossible to get them to stop doing it. The third tenet is outlining the replacement or alternative behavior. And then the fourth is to reinforce that replacement or alternative behavior. Sounds easy, except that there are several challenges you're going to encounter when you're trying to modify a student's behavior. The first of which is the student themselves cannot change on their own. The second challenge is that human beings do not like to change. The third is you, as the reinforcer, have to be vigilantly consistent. And I'm talking like you need to be doing the exact same thing every single day. And then the last challenge is understanding the student's motivation, again, is key. And that brings us back to motivation. There are 2 types of motivation. That's right, that's it, 2. The first is either to escape or avoid something, or the second is to want or get something. Understanding the motivation of the student is so critical, because when you actually start to lay out your rewards program, if you don't know which motivation the student has, then your rewards program is going to be completely ineffective. And that brings us to the reward system. Now, there are 2 types of rewards. There's an extrinsic reward and an intrinsic reward. And I'll give examples of both. Now, extrinsic is all about external, and intrinsic is internal. So extrinsically, the example for a student would be, I get an ice cream cone if I get an A on my test. Now, that's an extrinsic reward. They're going to get an ice cream cone, which is an external reward, if they get an A on the test. Now, we do this as adults as well. So as an adult, if I work hard and save money, I will go on a nice vacation or buy a handbag. Again, extrinsic, external, you're going to get a vacation or a handbag. Now, intrinsic is internal. There's no reward that's tangible. It's internalized. And so for a student, I got an A on my test, and intrinsically, so they feel good. There's pride there. And that's what a lot of students do when they go to school. That's what people do when they go to work. And it's the same thing for an adult. I work hard because I want to be the best in my company. So there's fulfillment, there's satisfaction, That's the reason that they go to work. It's not for a paycheck. It's actually because they feel good about what they're doing. When you're setting up a rewards program, obviously the first key is to do extrinsic rewards, because when you're trying to change someone's behavior, they need to be able to see that they're actually making progress. So typically for elementary students, they use stickers or stars or even points. As they get older, those types of extrinsic awards don't really have as much effect because, one, they've been used on younger students, so teenagers look at it and go, that's baby stuff, so they're not as incentivized. So you have to kind of get to where a teenager is. And so in the rewards programs that I always built for teenagers, it always was money based. So I would work with a parent and say, okay, instead of giving an allowance, let's say, what is your budget? And for the entire year, and then divide that out by 52 weeks, and then come up with very, very specific and targeted behaviors that the parent and the school want. And then based on those behaviors, dividing out each behavior with a dollar amount. So every time that student did that, they got that money. And so if they decided not to do their homework, they didn't get the 50 cents that day. So if they had 5 days of homework, that's 50 cents each, that's $2.50 a week. If the student doesn't want to do it, they don't do it, but they're not going to get paid for it. And so there's an incentivized reward system attached to it. And teenagers are pretty much, that's what they're driven by. It's money. They want independence, and they have none because they're under your roof and they don't have a job and they have no other way of getting stuff. So for a teenager, money is a huge incentive. External rewards are also much easier to do because, again, they're tangible. You can track an external reward. The student does X, Y, and Z, they got X, Y, and Z. But you want to be able to help the student, support them through the change in the behavior, so that when eventually they're able to do that behavior consistently, time after time after time, they no longer need the reward, because now what they get is that intrinsic value of, look at what I've done. They feel a sense of pride, self-confidence, self-worth. It improves their self-image. And once you've done that, for a student who typically may have done very poorly with grades, may have done very poorly socially, may just not really fit in, now they have a sense of self. And once they have a sense of self, they're able to tackle and conquer the obstacles that are going to come their way. I know I made all of that sound really easy, and if it was that easy, everybody would be doing it, and we wouldn't have so many problems in schools and classrooms, and kids wouldn't be getting into trouble. So really, where is the nuance to all of this? And the reason that I've become an expert, the reason that I've done trainings throughout the entire state of New Jersey and trained over 1,000 educators, principals, supervisors, superintendents on this program, is that you have to understand the student's motivation, because as you start to change the behavior, so obviously the first tenet is to identify the inappropriate behavior. Once you do that, and then you lay out what you want the replacement behavior to be, the student is going to initially make change, and they're going to follow this system. They're going to get the rewards, and things are going to look really rosy. In fact, you're going to look like a genius. But what happens is, as the student becomes less dependent on the reward, again, the external reward, they don't actually make a transition from extrinsic to intrinsic without like a full safety net around that student, because now they're kind of juxtaposed against themselves psychologically. So they have their old self, which is what they're used to. Now they have their new self, which they're not used to. And those two are now battling each other inside the student's mind. And so instead of the student saying, oh, this is really good and that's really bad, no, they're going, that's new, that's old, I don't like change, I want to go back to what I used to do. And so what happens is these two psychological forces are going against each other. And so what's critical while you're doing this plan is that the student is changing over time as well, which means that the plan has to change, because there's a possibility that a student originally starts with the inappropriate behavior as a way of escaping. But now, as they've changed, that same behavior has now changed motivation, and now it's to get something. And once that motivation changed, that plan has to change to address the motivation. And so what I'm really good at doing and what schools rely on me to do is notice when the motivation changes so that the plan can be adjusted to address the student wherever they are. So as a student is moving down this spectrum from inappropriate to appropriate, the plan has to follow them every step of the way. Because if it doesn't, what happens is the student kind of catches on, or there's a loophole, and they're going to find that space to go right back to doing what they were doing. And that's why so many plans that schools run, so many plans that behaviorists design, they're effective for a short period of time, but they're not effective long term because they don't fully address the student's needs, nor do they understand where the student is after 3 weeks, after 2 months, after 4 months. Because at a certain point, psychologically, that person, again, they're a human being, even though they're younger, they're still a human being. They're going to fight change every tooth and nail. So I hope I explained PBS in a easy to understand way. I know it's a very complicated topic. I know there's a lot of research behind it. Obviously, please go and check out PBIS.org. If you do have any comments or if you like this video, please click the like button. Please put your comments down. I read them all and they will be very helpful. If you want more videos on this topic, I certainly will make them. Other than that, I hope you have a good day.